it available online for those who cannot attend. So we are recording. To that end, some very quick housekeeping items. If you'll be sure to mute your microphones until you have a question or comment, that would be helpful so you don't catch too much background noise. This is a setup as a standard Zoom meeting, which means that you can use any of the technical cues for indicating you have a question or comment. And then certainly you can pop things into chat. All of it will be public, and that way we can capture whatever questions come up. I'm going to ask Stacy Johnston, the PI over at DWS, if you can kind of just keep an eye out for any cues, raised hands, Stacy, and go ahead and interrupt me. We can answer some questions throughout. I want this to be interactive and be sure that we don't just backlog all the questions to the very end. So before I go forward, I do want to introduce a handful of individuals to whom I may punt over some of your questions, depending on how tricky or stumping they may be. But I'm joined with a lot of very smart individuals who have been working alongside one another to really create the Restart, or bring to life the Restart New Mexico project. That includes Rachel Moskowitz and Ed Miller. They're a group pair from the Economic Research and Analysis team at Department of Workforce Solutions. Marcos Martinez, the Director and Leadership at the Employment Services Division at DWS. Veronica Alonso and Mags Aragon work in the WIOA team. And as you'll soon learn, the source funding for this RFA comes from the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. And so it serves as the backdrop for many of the RFA requirements. And then our colleague over at Higher Ed Department is Stephanie Montoya, the PIO, is on as well, and she's been integral to this project. So if you have a question that perhaps they can best answer, I'll just ask them to chime in. All righty, so off we go. Okay. Let's see here. Make sure I'm working, up and running. So before I give you an overview of the Restart New Mexico, excuse my typo. I hate when that happens on the first slide, and I'm not even going to hesitate to fix it because it'll be annoying. The Restart New Mexico RFA, I want to give everyone an overview of Restart New Mexico project so that you get a sense of what we're trying to achieve, big picture, and then certainly how the RFA and program development fits into that big picture. Many months ago, of course, the Department of Workforce Solutions began the planning process for how it would ultimately shift a major focus of its resources from unemployment insurance administration and support to employment services, reemployment, upskilling, and helping those who perhaps are underemployed. And so that conversation, of course, included a lot of discussion around workforce development, understanding the extent to which businesses may not be able to bring back the number of workers that they had prior to the pandemic, and how we would present job seekers with opportunities for new possibilities, new career pathways in partnership with post-secondary institutions and other training providers across the state. And so we believed, so we locked arms with the Higher Education Department of the Department of Workforce Solutions, and certainly started going to work around kind of conceptually what this would look like. It became very clear and apparent that integral to identifying where the workforce opportunity, workforce development, and workplace possibilities were across the state, that we created a middle road conversation about the pandemic, and certainly understood the extent to which employers were going to provide COVID-safe environments, exercise COVID-safe work practices. Employees were going to feel as though the state was progressing in terms of vaccinations, in terms of reduction of positive COVID cases. So that then prompted, of course, a partnership with the governor's office and the Human Services Department of Health divisions to ensure that, big picture, we weren't just talking about returning to work and reopening the state's economy, but we were also doing that within the context of the state's progress toward minimizing COVID spread. And so it's been a great partnership. We refer to it as the Restart New Mexico Collaborative. And essentially, I'll reference the collaborative and that group throughout the presentation. And so a part of the project, of course, really is the success of the project is dependent on the development of very quick workforce development opportunities that really align with existing in-demand occupation or existing job vacancies. And so essentially what we're looking to achieve is not only present a central location, right, where New Mexicans can access information about existing educational opportunities and existing job vacancies, but they can also connect the dots between, right, that job, the skill sets, the minimum qualifications, and then a training program that satisfies, right, the content mastery requirements to be qualified for those jobs in a very short period of time, or what we're referring to, right, as short-term or boot camp trainings. And so we of course believe that the post-secondary community in the state of New Mexico is very well positioned to respond to these in-demand occupations and skill sets. And so the RFA is being presented to New Mexico post-secondary institutions, Bible colleges included, and adult education programs. And so you all essentially serve as the higher ed community or the adult education community that is eligible to apply for funding under this RFA, okay? So essentially we're coordinating resources to amplify the services, right, through a comprehensive marketing campaign, which points individuals to a website that we've developed where the information, not just about training opportunities in demand occupations are available, but also information pertaining to vaccination progress, COVID mitigation strategies, safety in the workplace tips and tools, and of course, financial affordability resources to ensure that New Mexicans understand, what kind of resources are at their fingertips. As part of this process, we've created a toll-free number, a single access number where New Mexicans can consult with a career consultant to discuss any of these job opportunities, to be referred to financial resource point of contacts, or to be referred to the training providers, and that's many of you on this webinar. So clearly what we want to do is streamline the process by which a New Mexican gets on the phone, speaks with somebody about what they're interested with doing, and then moves through the referral process, the warm handoff process that connects them to the appropriate resources and contacts. So that's what we're looking at, big picture. That's how the RFA fits into the mix. And to be sure, not only will funded programs be available on the Restart New Mexico website, but the higher education department has done tremendous work to inventory all programs, right, that we essentially want to promote that are available, that you have as a higher ed and adult ed community, that you have put on their radar as available in this Restart New Mexico effort. So we, to articulate a bit more on what we mean, the collaborative means by short-term trainings and boot camps, for the purposes of this RFA, right, we have defined these opportunities as trainings that prepare participants for immediate employment opportunities in a specific field that results in a certificate of content mastery or a credential. And that credential primarily refers to, industry type credentials short of certificates, post-secondary certificates, short of associate degrees, and of course, short of any baccalaureate degrees or above. And therefore, fundable short-term trainings or boot camps are limited to 12 weeks of instruction, although we certainly, right, will entertain proposals leading to 12 weeks in less than 12 weeks. The trainings may include a combination of skills and competencies, so long that your proposal aligns those skills or competencies with current vacancy or in-demand occupation data. And just a couple of minutes before I change slides, I'm gonna allow for Rachel to provide a glance at the data that we'll make available along with this RFA. The trainings may lead to an industry credential, as I mentioned earlier, and of course, the trainings may be for credit or not for credit, depending on the institution's requirements for contact time relative to the programs or the credits that they want to award to participants. So certainly, we're looking for creativity around program offerings because there's a sense of urgency in which we want to start offering these programs. We certainly are highly excited about deviating from typical fall, spring, summer semester schedules and timelines that kind of box us into a couple of opportunities over the course of the next several months. So anything that can be done, understanding the audience, the target audience for these trainings by way of expediting the training offerings is very much going to be looked at. And as you will see, of course, later on in the evaluation component of the RFA, we're going to be looking to see how you've connected the course offering schedule, including time and duration, with those you anticipate will participate in those trainings. So what I would like to do now is I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to turn it over to Rachel, who's going to share hers and provide you an overview of those in-demand occupation data spreadsheets.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Ricky, for that. So we have the in-demand occupations in actually two places. One of them will be in a spreadsheet that will be available. And here's an example of the spreadsheet. The in-demand occupation will be a column that identifies the in-demand occupation as well as the occupational title and their SOC code, Standard Occupational Classification Code. We also have a website that has this information, and I will put the website link on the URL in the chat. There is a occupational outlook dashboard. It's on our website, in-demand and star occupations. And you want to click by geography, New Mexico, the in-demand. And here are all the in-demand occupations for New Mexico. If you're interested in how those were computed, there is a PDF spreadsheet that explains everything. And again, I will put this information in the chat. Thank you so much. I'll stop sharing as soon as I figure out how to do it. Oh, there it goes. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Are there any questions about the in-demand occupations?
I have one question.
Oh.
Hello?
Yep, go for it.
Oh, okay. Are those, so these are in-demand occupations for the state. Do we have to follow in-demand occupations for our region, or can we use the state?
Great question. So it really, the answer is no, you are not limited to just providing the in-demand occupations within your region, okay? And the reason for that is you may be offering a program that is integral to the state in terms of in-demand occupations, and you're offering it virtually, you're offering it remotely, and you can provide access to the training to individuals in all regions of the state, or more importantly, in the regions of the state where that in-demand occupation is best connected with an employer. So certainly we'll be evaluating the extent to which access and to that training makes sense relative to where the occupation is in demand across the state. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so on the occupation and skill alignment, of course, going back to Rachel's comment about methodology, right? We're looking at occupations that have a projected annual occupational growth greater than 7.7% or have annual job openings of 10 or more. And certainly, right, there's priority around connecting these in-demand occupations with existing vacancies across the state. That logic allows for the applicant to connect with employers who have existing vacancies and actually identify whether the training competencies align with their expectations for minimum qualifications. Let me just stop for a second. I'm going to check the chat. I think we have a chat. I want to make sure we answer a question. Stacy, is there a question in chat? I'm sorry, I'm sharing my screen. I'm not able to see it.
There is. It says, do the trainings offered have to be entered in the ETPO?
Oh, great question. We're gonna get to that, and we'll discuss how our thought behind funding tuition for the first training provides some timeline, right, or some time flexibility for getting that done. Great question. We'll get right to that. Now, also, as it relates to occupation focus eligibility, applicants can also propose a program that prepares participants for other local in-demand occupations, meaning that you identify the occupation as in demand very more locally, and it is not included on the in-demand occupations list that Rachel has shared with you. And in order to qualify those occupations as eligible program focus areas, occupations demanded by employers, right, must be expressed on written statements. And we ask that at least 3 employers who regularly hire for such occupations be provided within your proposal. So if you are located in a region in the state that perhaps, right, is growing in a single area, and multiple employers are looking to ramp up significantly over a short period of time, they may not appear in the in-demand occupation spreadsheet, but the workforce, training for the workforce is critical for your region, connecting with those employers and asking that they articulate that need, and then simultaneously articulating the skills, right, and minimum qualifications associated with those needs would be perfect in satisfying the requirement to demonstrate demand, and also in satisfying how the proposed training program aligns with their needs. So keep that in mind, right? So areas of growth identified by economic development initiatives, association employers, including, for example, New Mexico Restaurant Association, outdoor recreation associations, hospitality associations, are key to ensuring, of course, that what you're presenting to us is aimed at satisfying an in-demand workforce training need.
You have another question.
Please go ahead, Stacy.
Okay. It says, I imagine there are limitations to using federal funding to create cannabis training programs. Can you speak to this?
Yes, that idea will go up in smoke very quickly. And so that's a great question. And Mags, I want to let you respond. I know that our WIOA team, Marcos included, has certainly explored the extent to which state legalized production laws intersect with federal funding restrictions. So Mags or Marcos, do you want to comment on that?
I was hoping Mags would take that, but
I'm here.
Go ahead, Veronica.
Okay, so currently in our state Title I individual training account policy, which is what guides the, which is the funding that will be used to pay for the trainings. Our current state policy does have a clause in there that states that WIOA funding cannot be used to support the use of any kind of cannabis training.
Thanks,
I hope
Veronica.
that answered the question.
So, and the only thing I'd like to add is when we did the research as well, and Veronica is exactly correct. I don't know, and it's going to be your call, Ricky, but I don't know that I'd specifically discourage those types of programs, because I know that we did get authorization and approval to use Gen Fund to build some of those programs. The students would not be able to use WIOA funding to pay the tuition, but we could potentially build some of those with general fund. But Ricky, that would be your call.
Sure. So, so what I want to do is I don't want to mix up the pots here with regards to RFA not. What I will encourage is, if you are looking to develop a cannabis production training, workforce development training program, we'll put our contact information out to you all, and we can have a separate conversation about other additional resources perhaps available for that kind of training. We may use the RFA as a framework for what kind of proposals or what a proposal might look like. but we don't want for you all to submit a proposal under the RFA, understanding that the source of the funding is the funding that Veronica referred to. And the question was a great segue, because the next slide talks about that source, right? The Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, right, provides for what's called 10% funding. Otherwise, governor reserve funds used to develop or identify education and training programs that get folks back to work. And so what we're looking to achieve is funding programs that are eligible under the WIOA 10%. And again, that essentially has guided the parameters of this application. At this point, we've identified 1.5 million that we can dedicate to funding programs. We are already looking at the extent to which we can increase that 1.5 million to $2 million. I think part of that will rest on the response of the current RFA. And if we feel as though the program is progressing and additional funds are needed to sustain the work that's being done, then certainly we may have a subsequent announcement about extending either the dollar amounts earlier on or extending the RFA deadline. The fund ceiling for program is $80,000 inclusive of the allowable indirect costs, which is capped at 10%. So we need to be clear that that doesn't mean that is the limit on the funding a single applicant can receive. More than one award may be made to a single applicant. So if your institution or your adult education program is interested in providing multiple trainings as allowed under this RFA, then you can certainly submit multiple proposals, even simultaneously, for multiple award considerations by the collaborative. And so to that end, we may, of course, and I have this in a separate slide, we may fund similar programs more than once or at more than one at a time. And that's because we are giving a lot of consideration to access, right? So if two institutions propose very similar and even identical programs, the first thing that we will look at is the extent to which collaboration could occur between the institutions for cost efficiency measures. Or we may say that offering the two programs separate and apart from each other is integral, given the demand, given the number of participants that the trainings are capped at, etc. So we're not necessarily creating a very competitive environment, as you'll see later on when we talk about the rubric. In fact, the proposals aren't necessarily competing against one another. We'll be looking for benchmark scores on proposals that we believe are critical to reopening New Mexico's economy.
Ricky, there are several questions in the chat.
All right, I'm going to stop here. Let me actually stop sharing my screen, and then I can actually see some of them. All right, so here we go. Can you speak about the indirect cost limitations? Do we use our own federal indirect cost rate, for example, 35.8% of salary benefits? And the answer to that is 10%. So if your institution has negotiated an indirect cost rate with your with federal agencies, you may not apply that rate. We're limiting the indirect cost rate to 10%. Will the PowerPoint be available in addition to the recording? Absolutely. We'll publish this as soon as we can. And then Marvin, will the WIOA help find employers for example trades programs? So Marcos, why don't you comment on the employer outreach efforts of the Employment Services team and how the work that's being done by the institutions and the training providers will be connected with job referrals?
Absolutely. So what we're seeing right now is we're seeing we probably are up to about close to 10,000 job openings currently. We have a special all hands program that is specific to businesses who are hiring now during the pandemic and now towards hopefully the tail end of the pandemic. So we have all of those job postings in our system. We are working with employers specifically to see how we can get those postings filled. I can tell you that Where we are struggling in some cases is folks with these specific credentials that they're going to need. Also, as part of the Restart program, we are going to have a specific queue in that 1-800 number and on the website specific to businesses, where businesses will come in, and we will make sure that we talk to them about the program, about the different trainings that that you folks would be putting together, and how those tie to specific openings. So we're hoping that, along with folks that are looking to get into training and how we can get them into that, we're hoping that we have a similar large group of businesses that are looking to fill their positions. And that way we can have a better idea of what skill sets are going to be required and how we can better tie those people coming out of your training programs, or even helping to determine what those missing skill sets are, to better tie them with the employers, with the students that are coming out of classes.
Thank you for that, Marcos. And in a little bit, we will discuss a provision that you may have read in the RFA that asks for or that articulates the requirement that each program set aside time to ensure that each of your participants are enrolled or registered in the Workforce Connection online system. So, and of course, we can provide the career consultant assistance for getting that done. All right. Let me see here. Let me catch up to where I'm at. Thank you all for the questions, and Stephanie and Stacy, again, just keep jumping in to make sure I don't miss anything. All right, so I think we're here, correct? Eligible applicants. So the Restart Collaborative encourages, of course, that eligible participants collaborate to the greatest extent possible, and of course, examples of that include measures that provide for cost efficiency, right? Co-development of program curricula, the sharing of resources, co-teaching programs, co-offering training programs to increase enrollment capacity. So again, we're not opposed to duplicative programs in different parts of the state, especially if that training program really is limited to in-person instruction, and access becomes an issue when only one institution or one training provider offers it. So we do want to encourage collaboration to the greatest extent possible. Now, on our end, if we receive programs that we believe could prompt a collaboration, then we will communicate that with you all. So we don't want to shift the burden to you all to email every other eligible applicant and ask them what it is they're proposing to do. But if we receive a proposal that is similar to, that is connected with, or duplicative to, then we'll make some determinations about whether we could facilitate that collaboration in a way that doesn't intersect, of course, with the outcomes or the overarching goals of those trainings. Right? The following entities are eligible for funding, as I shared earlier: public and tribal institutions and adult education programs that are affiliated with a public institution. And just so that you're aware, we certainly aren't, trying to limit participation of training opportunities based on funding, but certainly based on the ability to function or to offer this program through an RFA as opposed to a request for proposals process. As you may know, public post-secondary institutions hold an exemption to the RFP process, so the RFA kind of streamlines things for us a bit.
There are a few questions, if I may.
Go for it.
Okay, there's two-part here. So first, will the information on the occupational openings be shared for effective alignment and design? And then also, can we get a list of training participants so we can look into collaborating?
Right, so what we want to do, the goal on the Restart New Mexico website, of course, is to connect those dots, as I mentioned earlier, between the funded programs, the in-demand occupations, and the available vacancies. So we will publish, and it sounds like it'd be beneficial to isolate, right, the funded programs. Right now, the website already provides users with access and information on existing programs available across the state, but we can isolate those that are funded so that you can review them and determine if collaboration ahead of proposal submission is a possibility. And the first question again, Stacy?
Sure. It says, will the information on the occupational openings be shared for effective alignment and design?
Right, so we're going to make those available as quickly as possible. I think another one came in.
It was a thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. All right, allowable expenditures. Here again, articulating the administrative cost cap at 10%, and a total application request inclusive of that 10% indirect cost at $80,000. I think there's a lot of flexibility within the allowable expenditures, and we did provide with the RFA some budget sheets that kind of simplify the process by which you categorize these appropriately. But essentially, we can fund any costs associated with that program curriculum development, including faculty release time, faculty compensation, necessary consultation expenditures, perhaps with subject matter experts or experts in the field who could best inform on appropriate competencies or quality instructional delivery methodologies. Training for faculty, for example, quality matters to ensure that if a program is going to be offered online, that it's delivered at high quality. Any software licenses or access fees necessary for participants to access the content or to access supplemental materials to ensure content mastery. Any costs associated with use of the learning management system at your institution. Certainly the proposal ceiling doesn't lend itself to the purchase of a learning management system, but if your institution, for example, requires fees for online courses that are associated with the use of learning management systems or other online resources, then they're allowable. Purchasing any online support systems that may help students overcome any challenges to remote and online learning systems, including online tutorials or advisement platforms and support using technology. Supply costs associated with instructional planning or instructional delivery. And then, of course, what we're interested in seeing is that the proposal builds into the budget the ability to offer at least one of the training or bootcamp sessions at no cost. And this here is where we address a couple of priorities for the collaborative. The first, of course, being affordability and access, and the second being some opportunity for the institution to move their programs onto the eligible training provider list if appropriate. So to answer the question about whether it is going to be a required expectation that the programs be ETP eligible, no, it is not. However, being able to develop a proposal, submit it, receive funding, and offer that program at no charge provides the institution with ample opportunity, right, to work in parallel with the ETPL administrator if you would like to move it on there and get that done in a timeline that allows for training number 2 and so on to be available for Title I funding resources. So I guess we're creating that timeline cushion so that we don't slow down program offering, but we also provide an opportunity for you to get it onto the ETPL. So that's kind of our thinking with the cost of attendance being included. And of course that would include any necessary fees that you would normally charge, the cost of the instructor providing that short-term program as well.
A few questions on that, Ricky, if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
Can the funds be used for supportive services for participants like transportation, childcare, and then also can it be used for internships to students?
That's okay. So transportation, let's take a look at some of those. Childcare, and then and what was
internships?
Internship.
Hmm?
I want to say immediately, right, that we can mull over each of those 3 individually and provide a response with a subsequent FAQ. At a glance, right, the going back over here to the term mitigate issues, we're using remote and online learning systems, supplies, cost, and plan. Yeah, let us talk about that as a collaborative. I don't want to provide a response immediately, but I've written down transportation, childcare, and internships. The first two, of course, being supportive services that, of course, promote access. And the last one is probably not as likely as the first two, but we can provide a response as quickly as possible.
Ricky.
Yep.
This is Veronica. May I add something to that?
Please.
Okay, so if the program is approved to be on the eligible training provider list and the training is paid, going to be paid by Title I funding, then those students are eligible for supportive services under Title I. So they're, if that's the route that that student ends up going, then there is the supportive services that can help that individual, that student.
That's great, Veronica. So ultimately, Title I funding on a per student as eligible basis would provide the transportation and childcare. The internships, not necessarily, but they could be viewed at some sort of related work experience, right, or on-the-job training. So we may provide a response that discusses how an internship, for example, could be translated to an on-the-job training experience that's attached to the training.
And I'm sorry, a follow-up to that is, can the funds be used to pay tuition and books for students enrolled in the program?
Yeah. So for the first round, yes, tuition for sure. So the cost of attendance, tuition, synonymous with one another. And if the what we would prefer, I believe, because we want for that first session to be offered at no cost to students, is if the institution were to include the purchase of books as supplies that would then be used for subsequent trainings, that would be a cost-efficient measure that I believe would be fundable under the supplies.
And then another one for your list there is, can the money be used towards apprenticeships?
Okay, great. Just an expansion there so that we can discuss it. What would the costs of the apprenticeships be? Meaning that the apprenticeship would be at the institution and the wages would be paid through the funding?
It says yes.
Okay, so it's similar to a work experience, right? So yeah, we'd have to look to see because the apprenticeship, right, would be limited to the award cycle. So so it'd be interesting to see how, for example, all of that could be, how all of that could take place within the confines of the funding maximum and the timeline. But essentially, on-the-job training components attached to the related instruction, we can respond in an FAQ to that. Great questions. Great questions. Okay, so the proposals, right, are limited to 10 pages, and that doesn't include the budget sheets. You can attach those in addition to the 10 pages, but we certainly, want to minimize the burden on you all, and we believe that you should be able to include the following in that page limit. In addition to essentially a program overview, right? If we'd like to see a training anticipated start and end date, which of course helps us identify the eligibility on the duration of the program, the extent of which, or the modality, I guess is the better way to say it, the extent of which the training can be offered online, helps us make some determinations about fundable other programs, other similar programs that are fundable, participant capacity, and of course the minimum skill level or training levels that the participants will need to have in order to enter the training, right? And this of course speaks to access, understanding that job seekers come in at various skill levels and in some cases, depending on the shift in career pathways, minimal background knowledge in some fields. So we would really like to get a handle on what the individual would need to know by way of basic skills in order to enter into the program. for the career consultants who will be making referrals directly to your training programs, it's important to understand what those minimum skills are so that the referrals are meaningful. Of course, the proposal should include occupation and skill alignment, either with the in-demand occupations or with the employer attestation to in-demand jobs necessary at a local level. The points of contact, if there are two different individuals who are the point of contact on the programmatic side, meaning individuals who might answer questions about the application process, the training itself, would be programmatic. On the administrative side, that would be the point of contact for the MOU, for funding, and of course, cost reimbursements. The training application process must be included in your narrative. You do not need to include the training application necessarily, but certainly the process through which the interested participant would appeal to be admitted into the training. Those are, of course, again, integral to the critical referral process. And we'd like to see how the institution consulted with at least one of the employers listed on the in-demand occupation list to ensure program alignment, right? We're not trying to create an IRAP scenario for the RFA, but certainly want to be sure that at least one employer did provide counsel on the training competencies. Of course, program outreach and recruitment strategy by your institution, and then the budget summary, which essentially provides some budget narrative that would complement the budget submission spreadsheets that are provided. If you are going to submit a proposal that is collaborative with another partner, we simply ask that within the budget summary, you provide a cost allocation for each of those partners, understanding that we, of course, would enter into agreements with each individual partner.
And a quick question for you.
Yeah.
Could you give examples of credentials that are lacking and preventing employers from hiring?
Credentials that are lacking and, say that again?
Sure. Credentials that are lacking and preventing employers from hiring.
Sure. I mean, so some two simple examples that align with the short-term training, right, would be like a CDL or a CNA, or med assistant, depending on how you could back in the time requirements to 12-week period. So an industry credential like a CDA, right, or a CNA, which has been on the in-demand occupation list for quite some time, would be two examples, right, of credentials and direct referral trainings that we could partnership with long-term care facilities, hospitals, or even state government. CDLs in certain parts of the state continue to be in demand. And so certainly those would be two examples of credentials, industry credentials that could be achieved over the allowed period of time. Other examples of non-industry credentials, of course, would be a combination of skills or competencies that would prepare an individual for a specific occupation. For example, cash handling, inventory, and customer service competencies that would prepare a job seeker for working in a hotel front of the house. So again, industry credentials is an option, but certainly a mix of competencies that are listed as minimum skills for an in-demand occupation is also acceptable to us.
And for the proposal, will a letter of support from the employer be required?
So if that is how the proposal is going to satisfy the overview of how the institution consulted, then certainly. Otherwise, I think for us is indicating the employer, the name of the employer, the level of consultation that occurred with that employer. I think articulating how that consultation took place is more important, I think, than a letter of support. Understanding that there may be multiple employers who would be looking for those positions too. So it's not necessary that an employer commit to that letter of support, because it could suggest, right, that they're also committing to hiring individuals who complete the program, and they may not be willing to do that. but certainly listing the employer and the consultation process, how that took place in the proposal narrative would be sufficient.
Thank you.
Great. As we mentioned earlier, let me just make a note of the letter of support. That's a good FAQ question. Okay, great. Like I mentioned earlier, unlike a typical request for proposal, the RFA is creating an opportunity for funding multiple proposals all at the same time, including duplicative proposals if we feel as though it's in the best interest of the project to fund multiple programs who are preparing participants for similar occupations. What we've decided to do as a collaborative is not just set a minimum score for funding, but we set a minimum score per metric, which is essentially 85% of the total possible points. So what we'd like to see as we rate proposals is not only that the minimum score is 85, but that the minimum of 85% total possible points has been reached on every metric. Be sure that your proposal lacking in any one of these areas doesn't disqualify it. The scoring team may request additional information or clarity on any component of the proposal that perhaps could address the minimum score requirement. So if we receive your proposal and we feel as though what you're proposing by way of focus area is critical and the score isn't where it needs to be on any single metric, then we can push that back, request additional clarity or information, and ask that you resubmit. The goal here, of course, is to really create a lineup of training programs that we believe are going to help jumpstart the state's economy. And by no way do we want to become too formal in our ability to do that institutions can't provide additional information and get their proposals funded. So you see the metric here is identical to how it's presented, with the inclusion of that minimum score per metric threshold that we'd be looking at. And what's important to us, of course, isn't that any one of these things becomes more important than the other, but that each of them is given good consideration. All right. Like with most funding opportunities, there are some reporting requirements that we've listed within the RFA. I'll call your attention to the last line first, and that is we will provide you with a report template after your proposal is funded. And I'll be full disclosure here. We continue to establish a project evaluation strategy that we believe will help us best understand the impact that this project had to essentially getting New Mexicans to work and expanding their career or professional possibilities. So as we speak, our team, Ed and Rachel and others, are working with Mags, Veronica, and Marcos, of course, to identify how we can best capture the impact of the project with minimal impact to our partners, meaning that how can we extract data from our Workforce Connection online system? How can we utilize wage data? How can we utilize existing resources to ultimately capture what the long-term impacts of the project are? But we will need some information from you all in order to use those tools to measure impact. Some of those things include a roster of students who enrolled in your programs by first, last name, and last four numbers of their social security number. So that does prompt a training application requirement for you all to include the social security number. The identification of which students successfully complete the funded program. So we're looking at retention rates by student. And then, of course, on the qualitative side of evaluating your program is narrative on what the perceived barriers were, or what the identified or observed barriers were that prevented program completion among those that didn't complete the program. And then, of course, we'll have an expenditure report requirements. So to better simplify, the reporting requirements, and then, of course, to include other measures that will be important for the evaluation team, we will send you a report template that'll essentially walk you through what it is we need to know. We'll have full understanding at that point that the application process is complete, and you may not be able to capture information after the fact. So we'll get it to you as quickly as possible so that if any information needs to be captured on the front end or during the training, you have ample opportunity to do that. On this slide, I just want to underscore a couple of critical provisions that are included in the RFP. And then after I go through this, I'll turn it over to Veronica and she can touch on one provision specific to ETPL. So the program completion requirements must include participation in what we call the WCOS, right? The Workforce Connection Online System. That's our online job system. And so we provide a link to where that system can be accessed, but we certainly would like to encourage that your programmatic contact work with the Department of Workforce Solutions or Workforce Connection Centers to facilitate that registration process with a career consultant. The reason for that is because the career consultant can flag those participants during the registration process as restart participants, and it better helps us, or it helps us to better create a cohort for the project. Otherwise, what we will do if we're not available or if the career consultant is not part of that registration process is we can later tag participants with your rosters, but doing it on the front end will help us, especially once that participant has completed the training program and we start the process of direct referrals to employers. So this is really a measure that not only helps in program evaluation, but in participant referrals. Supplanting is a no-no. The second main bullet here, of course, encourages the leveraging or the supporting by additional resources, but certainly program funding shall not be used to supplant any existing funds that you have available for workforce development programming. But the extent to which you leverage existing resources to maximize program effectiveness and efficiencies is at your discretion, and you're encouraged to do so. Something that's important for your financial or administrative point of contacts is, given the surge of programs that we hope to receive, we expect that the institutions are okay with a quarterly expenditure reimbursement process. So, essentially every 3 months submitting for reimbursement against expenditures would be helpful for us on an administrative side of things. So that's what we're including as a provision. And then, of course, again, underscoring that we're not trying to create a highly competitive environment. We're trying to create an environment that facilitates quality program development, but we certainly will fund multiple institutions or multiple programs per institution, and we may fund identical programs if we feel as though they're needed to meet job seeker demand. So again, we're really looking to ensure that quality, consistency and quality and funding allowability is achieved, but we're trying to really facilitate a good system that encourages collaboration and partnership and really maximizes job seeker need. So what I want to do is turn it over now to Veronica, and she can, Veronica Alonso, you can talk a little bit about the ETPL and some of the frequently asked questions.
Okay, perfect. Good morning, everyone. So I didn't want to duplicate some of the information that is in the RFA. So there is some additional information on page 7 of the RFA, and that speaks to the one piece in there that I do want to point out. It speaks about the provider must be in compliance with the oversight agency. So what that means that if you are a public institution, your oversight agency is going to be New Mexico HED. But if you have another, if you are another type of provider, which I think we have limited to public institutions, right? So most of you will already meet that requirement because you're under HED. So also in the RFA, there is there's an email there, my email, but we do have a specific email for the ETPL, and that is the nmetp.administrator@state.nmus. So if you will please communicate to me through that email, I would really appreciate it. So what do you need in order for your institution to enter the program into the system? You're going to need a institutional account. So if you do not already have a account, you can reach out to me and I will walk you through the steps of how you would create that account in our system. You will be utilizing the Workforce Connection online system as well. And that is where you're going to create and have access as a provider. The next, okay, who will enter the program information into our online system? So most of the institutions already have a designated staff who does that on behalf of the institution. So you're going to want to utilize that same individual who already does that. If you're not sure at your institution who does that, you can reach out to me as well, because I can let you know who has the user account already. Who will review and approve the programs entered? That would be myself. That's the state ETP administrator. Could you scroll up for me? Down, up, down. Oops. Okay, I'm not seeing.
Sorry, Veronica. I think we limited to those QA stuff, and then we can open it up to any additional questions.
Okay.
Veronica, I have one, I think, just for clarification. To your knowledge, are there any public post-secondary institutions that do not have programs on the ETPL?
I believe that the only institute right now is New Mexico Highlands.
Okay, so essentially for the rest of you, right? For the rest of you, certainly your institution has a point of contact. And for the rest of you, the process should be a familiar one. But certainly if you have any questions about whether the program would meet eligibility for ETPL, we provided Veronica's contact information and email. But if there are any questions now, we certainly open up the floor.
I think I saw a question just a little while ago, but I can't find it. Oh, okay. If Title I funds can be used for tuition, books, and fees. Yes. So when you enter the information into the system, it asks for that information to be added in there. So most of the information that you're going to be providing in regards to the RFA is going to be a lot of the information that's going to be entered into the weak cost system as well. So I would be referencing that information. You would be referencing your information to enter that, again, enter that information into the system. I do want to add on there that once it is entered into the system, it should only take 24 to 48 hours for me to review and then determine eligibility. We will communicate back and forth. So once you've entered that information in the system, you're going to want to email me to let me know that it's in there, and I will review, and then I will correspond back with you once it's been reviewed and approved.
Right, great question. And then the going back, Anne, to your question about supplanting. So if you've provided the textbooks, for example, or other associated costs within your program proposal and it's funded, then when you go in to submit the program for ETPL, then you wouldn't include the cost of those books so that they wouldn't be included in the Title I funding. Great. So critical dates for you all. First of all, it's important to say that in terms of deadlines and timelines, the RFA is revolving. So the most important of all critical dates, of course, include the December 15th proposal due date. That means that essentially that's the last date on which we will entertain a proposal. So it's the same date as the application submission deadline date. The proposal review process will be revolving as well. And what we're committing to is a 2-week turnaround time on reviewing proposals and providing applicants with notice of funding. And we'll continue to do that through December 15th or until we exhaust all the funding that's available for the project. John Casado is our point of contact on proposal submission. And so we certainly are open to receiving proposals from this point moving forward. And what you need most of all, of course, is that the resources relating to in-demand occupation. So we'll get them posted as quickly as possible and disseminated as quickly as possible. So having said that, I just want to open it up the remainder of the time to any questions that you all might have. And those things that we can answer immediately, we certainly will. If not, we can include them in a follow-up FAQ.
Ricky, there were a couple more questions in the chat. One is asking if the funding is for 1 year or recurring for multiple years.
Great question. It's yeah, the awards are one-time funding allocations and not recurring.
And then another question is, could we use this funding to pilot something and then pursue ETPL eligibility for sustainability afterwards?
Yeah, so so certainly the ETPL, moving the program onto the ETPL is not a requirement. So so it's not necessary to consider the project a pilot. If you receive funding and the program is offered one time, then there's you know there's not going to be a lot of follow-up from us that the program be offered multiple times, right? Certainly your proposal is going to contain substance about what you are planning to offer at a minimum. And if that is one training and only, and that will be the one training that funds the cost of attendance for participants, we would certainly like to see that the proposal would introduce a training program that could be offered multiple times. The second and beyond, you know, being paid for perhaps by Title I partnerships or by participants themselves, but it isn't a requirement. So certainly, and to that extent, it may not be necessary, right? Let's just say, for example, you develop a program that meets local employer workforce development needs. If you're able to achieve those needs or closing the gap in those needs after one program offering, then that's wonderful. And then you may consider an entirely different focus area. So, so to answer, I hope that answered your question. Great, Hannah, thank you very much. All right, anything additional?
Ricky, this is Veronica again. I think it also answers Jeannie Winchell's question in that, do they enter all of the programs under Restart on the ETP? That would be no. You only want to enter the programs that you want to see if they qualify for Title I funding.
Great. All right, wonderful. Well, we will get this information, the PowerPoint and the recording posted. I think, Stephanie, I saw you place in the chat that you've made the link available to where they can get the information in the video, the presentation in the video. And if you'll give us just a bit to craft an FAQ on some of the feedback, we can get that posted there as well. But thank you, Stephanie. She just popped the link in again. Waiting for you at the link already, of course, is the RFA. And we'll get the PowerPoint there probably by, and the recording there by close of business today. Super. Well, I want to thank you all for joining. I want to thank my colleagues for chiming in. And we look forward to seeing all that you have to offer. And we appreciate your partnership in the Restart New Mexico project. Have a great weekend.